Hello, I'm Norah O'Donnell. I'm here in our CBS This Morning Toyota Green Room with writer, producer, and director Nell Scovell. She's worked on iconic shows like The Simpsons, Late Night with David Letterman, Murphy Brown, NCIS, The Muppets, Coach, and Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which she created and executive produced. Nell, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so happy. We've spoken before, but never with cameras on.
Never on camera. And this is your first book?
First solo book.
First solo book, that's right. Just the funny parts. I mean, I look at that and I'm like, how hard is it to come up with a book title?
Well, this one was actually given to me by one of my mentors, a guy named Barry Kemp, and 5 years ago we're at lunch in the Universal Commissary, and I said, you know, I'm thinking of writing a memoir. And he went, you should call it Just the Funny Parts. And I know a good pitch when I hear it.
Yeah.
So
that's stuck in your head.
I did think of calling it Just the Angry and Bitter Parts, but that's like an 8-volume set.
Yeah, probably would not sell as well as Just the Funny Parts. But it's not just the funny parts in the book. You share a lot of details.
I do, and you know, Hollywood is tough on everyone, but I think it is especially tough on women and people of color.
How so? How did you find it was tough?
Well, you know, there's now the whole Me Too movement, but, you know, that's historically been part of Hollywood. And in fact, it's so codified, it even has a cute nickname, the casting couch, which does sound better than the sexual harassment sofa.
Right.
But, you know, this was accepted for so many years.
Right. It's just the way it was. And I mean, you're talking about, too, not just in front of the camera, right, but behind the camera and writing. I mean, there's so few women in comedy and so few women writing for comedy.
Especially in late night TV, which is where this all began. So in 2009, David Letterman goes on camera and says, I've had sex with women I've worked with. And anyone who worked on the show was not surprised by this. Right. And there was a lot of talk about whether what he did was right or wrong. And I had worked on the show. I was the second woman ever to write for Letterman. And I had some inside information. So I spoke up at that time and then pivoted to the gender discrimination in the writer's room.
Yeah, describe what kind of boss David Letterman was.
Well, it's a hierarchy, and he's the king, and everybody wants to please the king. And they have done studies where corporations that are hierarchical do have more harassment and abuse, you know, because the power is so concentrated at the top.
But you describe some pretty interesting things in the book about the way David Letterman not only treated women, but all of his writers and staff, right?
Right. Well, when I was there, he had this quirk where he would only speak to the head writer on his car phone, because this is pre-cell phone, but we did have phones just in cars. So you'd have to wait for him
for those younger viewers out there. Remember the car phone? Like, you were really cool if you had the car phone.
Yeah, no, that was huge. Yeah. So we would sit in the writer's room, watch him leave, and then 10 minutes later, the head writer would say, I'm going to go call him. I also tell this story about how he was, you know, look, this is like the funniest guy on television, and he never enjoyed the process. He never thought he did a good show. And in fact, after one show, he lined up all the producers, and he told them to take a swing at him. And he made them punch him. And I describe it in the book as it's this twist on the bully, as he's the bully who makes you punch him.
Yeah. And how was Garry Shandling influential?
Oh, well, there's this HBO documentary that's wonderful about him. So I write my first spec script for TV. The most popular show in America at the time is The Cosby Show. But I wrote for my favorite show, which was It's Garry Shandling's Show, which was the pre-Larry Sanders show that Garry did. And amazingly, they bought it, which is like you're a rookie who gets a home run in your first at-bat. And I go to LA to get my notes, and the first thing Garry says to me is, you write like a guy.
But that was like a positive compliment.
Huge compliment.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, and this only occurred to me years later, you know, Garry was very raw about his own relationships. He was very insecure about his looks in his stage routine. And it occurred to me, he writes like a girl. And I mean that as a compliment.
Right. And what do you mean that he writes like a girl?
Well, his choice of the things he wrote about, the jokes he wrote were often relationship jokes and how's my hair and things we would think were stereotypically female.
You've been doing this now for 3 decades.
Yes.
And you write about your successes and also your failures, but your personal motto, I like your personal motto, which is, right, that which doesn't kill me always allows me to regroup and retaliate.
Yes.
I get the regroup, but the retaliate.
Well, yeah. You know, I worked on Lean In with Sheryl Sandberg, and we always joked that if I had written it alone, it would have been called Barge In, and no one would have read it.
Not Lean In. That's funny.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think, you know, I have a thick skin. I had this wonderful, supportive mother. There's a story in the book about how she went to my 3rd grade parent-teacher conference, and the teacher said, Nell makes too many jokes in class. Could you ask her to tone it down? Yeah. So my mom delivers this message on my 40th birthday.
I love your mom for that.
I know.
And what did your mom say about that? Why she didn't tell you at the time? Because she thought, no, this is what makes my daughter special.
That's exactly right. And yeah, she wasn't going to take notes on my personality from my teacher.
Yeah. And so what did you think when your mom told you that at age 40?
Well, I just thought, you know, I've wondered, how did I escape this cultural bias?
Towards funny women.
Yeah. And, you know, on one hand, I had this mother who was protecting me, and I had 2 hilarious aunts. And they were the center of attention at every party. They had a very dark sense of humor. One day, my sister Alice was reading Little Women on the sofa, and my Aunt Pinky walked by, tapped her on the shoulder, and said, "Don't get too attached to Beth." So it wasn't self-deprecating. Yeah. It was.
So you knew it in many ways too, not only because your family was very funny. There was
right.
Yeah.
But also, you know, I grew up with Carol Burnett. I grew up. Joan Rivers was hosting The Tonight Show, and I thought she was funnier than Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
And you know, if you were born after 1970, you didn't see a female hosting one of the big 3 network nightly talk shows.
Right. Then you went to Harvard.
Yes.
And then how did you break into comedy writing?
Well, I was a sports writer first.
Yes, right, for the Boston Globe, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the reason...
Then you went to Vanity Fair, right?
Right, but I was drawn to sports writing because it's a less serious part of the paper. Yeah. And it's also emotional. I mean, think about it. It's the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat.
Right.
So I was drawn to that, and then one day I bump into a friend who's an editor, and she said to me, "I don't mean this as an insult, but I think you could write for television." Which
is actually really hard to write for television. It's hard to write in general, but writing for television too, because it's more for the ear, right?
Right. It's dialogue driven. It's character driven. But I liked it. There's a lot of psychology in it, really trying to get inside someone's head, whether that's, you know, Homer Simpson, Miss Piggy, or President Obama.
Yeah, know? Right. And you've written the jokes for President Obama for the White House Correspondents Association. That's different, too, I feel like, writing for them. I mean, not only writing jokes for a stand-up like that, not just a show, right, but for the President of the United States.
Well, what's fun is when you write a joke for the president, it shows up on the front page of the newspaper. And that doesn't happen when you're on a sitcom. Yeah. But he's really funny, and
he can deliver a line. I mean, I mean, think about all the people you've written lines for. Sometimes it's dependent on the. I mean, certainly some may fall flat just on the performance of the actor.
Well, I've been very lucky though, because I've worked with, you know, Bob Newhart and Caroline Rhea and Andy Samberg, and you know, it's like playing tennis with Serena Williams. I'm blank.
Serena Williams. Yeah.
And with Serena Williams, and if you just get your serve in, you know, they'll do the rest for the win.
So how did you end up, after all this, working with Sheryl Sandberg?
Well, we met through Facebook. So I write this piece in 2009 that's about gender discrimination in late night TV, and I kind of came out of the closet as a feminist. Right. And she does her TED Talk in 2010, which is amazing, why we have so few women leaders. And in 2011, a mutual friend through Facebook writes to me and says, have you seen Sheryl's TED Talk? And I write back, seen it, I memorized it.
Oh, wow.
So he put us together, and she was just starting to really ramp up her public profile. And I was very happy to be there and help.
I mean, because the book is not a funny book, meaning lean in.
Oh, lean in?
Yeah.
Well, I hope it's entertaining in its own way.
I mean, it's a great read, but in many ways, too. And now it's been more than 5 years. Yeah.
4 million copies.
4 million copies, that's right. You know, it's a disturbing kind of look at some way about the lack of advancement in women, where they should be.
Well, I think one of the benefits of the book is women supporting other women. I feel like we've made this huge leap in the past 5 years. You know, Sheryl made it cool for women to support other women. It used to be this duty that, you know, Madeleine Albright's famous, you know, there's a special place in hell. And I actually say in my book that there should be a special cloud in heaven for women who do help other women. Because sometimes it felt like a burden, and now I think women are really feeling like the rising tide lifts all boats.
Well, I hope I make it to that special place in heaven.
You will.
Congratulations.
Just for having me on.
Thank you, and congratulations on your book.
Thank you, Norah.
Yeah, congratulations.